Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for African News with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, the state of emergency brought in parts of Nigeria's northeast to tackle the threat of Boko Haram is over. This after a debate on its possible extension is held up by police firing tear gas in Parliament. The Assembly has been suspended until next week. Also, as Tunisia gears up for the weekend's presidential vote, we take a look at some of the candidates in the running for the top job as the country moves towards a return to full democracy. And more young Eritreans than ever are fleeing the country. Many say they're not only facing a repressive regime, but the bleak prospect of open-ended service in the army as the military pushes on with a conscription push. First up, in Nigeria, the state of emergency in the northeastern states hit by Islamist insurgents has been ended. The decision not to extend it was taken in a closed-door session Thursday after police fired tear gas in Parliament, and it was suspended until next week. Shirley Sitman has more.
Tear gas and police barricades weren't enough to keep these opposition MPs away from Parliament. Among them, the head of the lower house, Nigeria's fourth most powerful man. Thursday's debate was the first since Aminu Tambuwal switched from the ruling PDP party to the opposition, like several other MPs. The People's Democratic Party has tried to remove him from the speaker's chair. After the group escalated the parliament gates, police fired tear gas at them inside the facility.
We trekked, we couldn't go into the National Assembly premises in our cars. We trekked into it. And then we were visited with the tear gas.
Can you imagine tear gas in the chamber of the people? This parliament represents the sovereignty of the people.
APC MPs are opposed to President Goodluck Jonathan's plan to extend the emergency rule in the northeast region hardest hit by Boko Haram. They say the measures have been inefficient as insurgents have intensified their attacks. As the Senate's leader shut Parliament,
there will be no business in the National Assembly today, and the place remains shut until Tuesday.
The lower house said it had just rejected the emergency extension. The confrontation took place as the country is due to hold elections in February, in which Goodluck Jonathan said he will run.
Lawyers for powerful Nigerian televangelist TB Joshua say that they're challenging a coroner's order that he testify about a fatal building collapse in Lagos. Now, he's been summoned twice to give evidence at the inquest into the deaths of 116 people, but has so far never appeared. After Joshua's latest no-show on Thursday, the coroner said absent witnesses would be arrested. The preacher says that his synagogue Church of All Nations disintegrated in September after deliberate attack, but the hearing into the incident has been told by experts that the buildings were structurally unsound. Well, on Sunday, Tunisians vote in the first round of a presidential election that's key to the country's return to full democracy after months of political crisis. Earlier polls saw Islamist party Ennahda beaten into second place. The victors have said that they'll wait to see who's chosen as president to negotiate a coalition to run the country.
October the 30th, and officials announced victory for secularist Nida Tunis in parliamentary elections. Now their leader's favourite for the presidency. At 87, Beji Qaid Essebsi is no political newcomer. He served under both of Tunisia's post-independence rulers.
Youth isn't a question of years, it's a question of spirit. I represent a project to bring Tunisia back into the 21st century.
Last month's poll reflected many voters' frustration with Islamist Ennahda on security and the economy. The country's second biggest party now risks being pushed to the sidelines. They're warning against the return of the old regime.
There's fear in the country about a return to rule by a single party with control of the administration and institutions. We are against the state being dominated by one force alone.
Ennahda won't be running a candidate on November the 23rd, but voters will have plenty of choice. 27 people are standing, 26 of them men. Essebsi's main rival, incumbent Monsef Marzouki, says he's a bulwark against Ben Ali-era figures, a protector of the revolution.
I promise you, if I win the presidency, I will stand firm against tyranny and oppression. I will remain open to all the parties who support this project of building a new Tunisia on the ruins of the old. the presidential palace will be even more open than before.
It's been a bumpy ride since 2011, but Tunisia's leaders have managed compromises that have helped avert the chaos seen elsewhere in the Arab world. International observers hope this vote will be another step on the road to stability.
Conditions are good for an emerging democracy. Not everything's perfect, but there's a real plurality in today's political scene.
Whatever happens on Sunday, Tunisians look set for a long wait. A second round of voting on December the 28th is likely, and only once the largely ceremonial post of president is decided are formal coalition negotiations due to start.
The number of young people fleeing Eritrea has seen a sharp spike over the last month or so. Many head to Ethiopia, which has seen 6,000 Eritreans claiming asylum over the previous 37 days, double the rate of previous months. Well, the UN believes that it's in part down to a renewed conscription drive in the country. It's one of the most repressive regimes. Well, we spoke earlier to Martin Ploud, who's a journalist who's been in contact with some of those resisting the regime. He tells us why young Eritreans dread military service quite so much.
It can be military service without end. Literally, it can go on year after year after year. Some of the people are in it for 5 years, some for 7 years, some even longer. And they are become so desperate that they would do almost anything, walking across borders which have armed guards, minefields, into the arms of sometimes people traffickers. It is an absolutely appalling situation.
So some of those that you've spoken to are from an Eritrean resistance movement. What are they saying about other conditions in the country?
This is a group called Freedom Friday, and they talk about the really harsh conditions that there are inside Eritrea. Sometimes there is no electricity, there's very little water. I have been told by people that if you are a woman going to give birth in a hospital, you have to have someone who comes with you with 2 or 3 buckets of water so that you can be actually washed after you've been given birth to somebody. The food is in very short supply. The situation is absolutely appalling, and it is held in place by one of the most repressive dictatorships in Africa. The President Isaias Afwerki is supported by a foreign group called the Tigray People's Democratic Movement, TPDM. They are based inside Eritrea. They're trying to overthrow the Ethiopian government with whom the Eritreans have a huge dispute over the border. And they effectively act as guards trying to stop anything, the president being overthrown.
So I understand that currently there are EU discussions on relaxing sanctions against Afwerki's regime. Do you think this is the right approach?
Well, of course, it's up to, I'm a journalist, so it's up to the Eritreans to decide whether this is a good idea. But people that I was speaking to inside Eritrea were absolutely horrified by this. They said this is completely wrong. If you relax the pressure on the regime, it will just become worse. And they take, in a sense, the same position as the African National Congress took in South Africa when, during apartheid, they argued, no, although our own people will suffer because there are sanctions against apartheid, we want those sanctions to continue. And the Eritrean people, in essence, taking the same position.
Martin Platt there speaking to us a little earlier on. Well, despite a crackdown on poaching, South Africa says that illegal rhino slaughter is worse than ever. The Department of Environmental Affairs says that 1,020 rhino have been killed since the start of the year. Authorities had tried to curb the slaughter of the endangered animals by moving some into safety zones abroad, but demand for their horns has continued to skyrocket, and heavily armed poachers continue to sidestep rangers in pursuit of their prey. Well, that wraps up African News for me. Stay with us, though. More coming up after a short break.
Beirut revisited.
For almost 2 decades, Beirut was synonymous with violence, war and destruction. Since then, the city has healed its wounds with bulldozers and ambitious projects. In a dazzling renaissance, it has become the festive epicenter of the Middle East. But out of fear that the spectre of war will rekindle tensions, the country is in denial of its recent past. But some people want to forgive, but not forget. France 24 went to meet them.
Beirut Revisited on France 24 and France24.com.